The greatest power you possess is your ability to choose. Join Lowe's Moore as he reveals how you can begin to maximize that power by exploring yourself on the deepest levels and committing to making lasting and positive changes. Get ready to achieve breakthroughs that will lead to accelerated growth and transformation, because you are now tuned in to the Blueprint.
Why they actions contradict the lamb. I'm fellowshipping when I'm with the fam. That's more relations.
Good evening and welcome to the Blueprint with Lowe's Moore. Man, I am really excited to be back with you another Sunday evening. Let me just first start out, man. I just want to. We're just living in such a tough time, and so to all those who have, lost loved ones in regards to the virus, this whole pandemic, and for those who are struggling. A good friend of mine, last night we found out that he had COVID and had the virus, and may have contracted it, at a school. Just started feeling bad. He's home with his mom. His mom's a little older. She contracted it and now in the hospital. My prayers go out to him and his mom. I've been praying for her throughout the day. Man, this is just a tough time. So I can't emphasize the importance of following the guidelines, the importance of social distancing and social distancing and wearing a mask, and be careful of, I wanted everybody, to be with me during the course of the holidays and Thanksgiving. That's when we all get together, and Christmas, and we just, we just have to be safe as we travel around and, going in and out of stores and different things like that. Man, we just really need to be, we need to have common sense, and know that, you may even be young and you may feel like it doesn't affect you, right? Maybe it doesn't, but you don't know if you can attract it. But there are so many people out there who have so many other, secondary things that you can bring home to them. So I ask you to, to be conscious of your not just yourself, but your friends, your family, your coworkers, and in this, as we come to a close of 2020, be sensitive to the fact that this disease, this virus, is very dangerous. So please wear your mask, socially distance, and make sure you wash your hands often. And so I just wanted to say that because we're getting so many calls and, hearing so many things. So just want you to be safe, around this holidays and going into to 2021. And so my prayers go out to all those who have lost loved ones, all those who have attracted the virus, and I pray for your comfort in regards to their loved ones. And also I'm praying that you get a full recovery from this virus. And so tonight, I just wanted to say those things in regards to safety. And as I start off tonight's show, here is my seed, little basketball here. This is my pebble. You throw a pebble in a pond, and you get a ripple effect. And that's the one thing that Denzel Washington said, that I was a pebble thrown in a pond, and my life has given off a ripple effect. Well, we believe that the Blueprint each week, as we talk to guests. We interview guests. We have conversations that when I drop this, as I will now, I drop it now into the pond, and we just expect a ripple effect from each show and from the guests and from their experiences and their life. So again, thank you very much for your support each week. Man, this has just been exciting. It's just been awesome. And thank you for all your kind words and appreciation and comments. And, the Blueprint is here for personal development, and development of a good lifestyle. And so I'm excited to be able to bring it to you every single week. And so each week I have what we call is a book of the week. And this week's book of the week is How to Be Like Mike by Pat Williams. Good friend of mine, been with the Orlando Magic organization for many, many years now, was involved with the Philadelphia 76ers. He's an author of many books, many powerful books. And he has one out called How to Be Like Jesus, which I have also. And it takes the characteristics, personality of Michael Jordan. And we know Michael was a highly competitive person. And he takes that and breaks it down on how we can use some of those attributes, some of those characteristics, how we can apply them to our blueprint for our life. So it's a good read. It's an excellent read. And you get to know the intricacies of what we call MJ. You get to know the intricacies of him, and you get to know him in depth, but you get to pull out those qualities that you may need to move forward in your life as well. You can pull out some tools that you can use later on in your life. So that's a good read, How to Be Like Mike. And then we have a word of the week. And this week's word of the week is maturity. And I mean, in today's times, I always say, that when I grew up, one of the qualities that we learned from our families and from growing up in the Boys and Girls Club, particularly the Boys and Girls Club of Mount Vernon. And I mentioned in my book, From the Boys and Girls Club to the NBA, Life on the Narrow Road, I talk about the importance of growth, the importance of becoming mature, right? And mature individuals. And man, you can be 50, 60, 70 years old and be very immature, right? And you could be 10, 11, and 12, 13 years old, and you can be very mature. And maturity is the key to being successful in life, learning how to grow up and learning how to have common sense. And also we have, Hill and Pierce Hopper, affirmation of the week. Hill Hopper from The Good Doctor and his son Pierce. He sent me a number of these affirmations that he goes over with his son daily. And this week's affirmation is determination conquers disappointment. Determination conquers disappointment. Something, when you wake up in the morning, so much craziness on the television, on the news, right? And so sometimes you just need to get up and you need to say something to yourself to motivate you in the midst of all this negative. So, I like to get up and believe that I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. And that kind of encourages me, right? And one of my favorite, since I've been a little kid, when you get up and I'm down, the will to win is not nearly as important as preparing to win, right? If you want to win, you got to prepare for it. And so hope you enjoyed each of the book of the week, the word of the week, and the affirmation of the week. And so now, without further ado, I want to bring my good friend, Dr. Janice Hilliard. I want to bring her on tonight, and we're going to jump right into this conversation. Dr. How you doing?
I'm good, Lowe's. It's great to see you and hear you again, my friend. I've missed you.
Yeah, I missed you too. You know what? I was thinking when we first met. I remember it was doing Ben Gordon,
Hmm.
Ben Gordon week, and I remember that. I think we did it at Mercy College. I think it was at Mercy College, right outside of Hartley Park in Mount Vernon. And Ben was doing when Ben first started, he was doing Ben Gordon Day, right? And
Right,
it's
right.
to expand to Ben Gordon week, weekend. You know, he had the gospel concerts, the festivals,
Hmm.
all those things.
Hmm.
Then it grew into Ben Gordon week, right? And I remember his partnership with you and the NBA, right? Because
Right.
you spent a lot of time in the NBA, a lot of years in the NBA, in which we were going to talk a little bit about down the road here. But I just remember that it was a unique situation because we were having a conversation or we having a session on sports, careers, and alternatives. Like if I can't play the game, if I can't get on the court, the field, you know, or the diamond, you know, what am I going to do next? And you brought in a whole host of different uh, individuals who thought they were going to be, and maybe they started out being athletes, playing in high school, maybe even playing in college, but didn't make it to the pros. And some made it out of high school but didn't make it to college. And you need to find something to fall back on. And I remember that was very powerful to me and very important to me and Ben. It was something that we talked about all the time. Right. So, but before we get into that, I just remember that there was just a special time with you and getting to know you and having conversations, and then, you know, all the many things we did after that. But to get started, tell me how you're doing.
Oh, I'm doing great, Lowe's. As you know, I'm in Houston now, and moved back to kind of my home state and where I grew up after transitioning from the NBA in 2016. So it's great to be back home. Feeling great. I haven't been in Texas in a while, and I played here at the University of Houston. So being back amongst my former teammates and my family, and just being in the state of Texas, I'm feeling really, really great and excited to be reconnected with you again.
Yeah, this is awesome. I couldn't wait. I mean, you know, whenever I schedule a guest, I get excited. I mean, and I just get my mind started to go about the things that we talked about or the things that we were involved in, and so I just can't wait till you come, and then I get real excited when I get to that last few days. And so, you're my good one of my good buddies that I grew up with is down in Houston. Rodney McRae is down in Houston area, and he was on the show about a month ago. Him and his brother Scooter McRae.
Hmm.
They were both on the show and played at Mount Vernon High School, and we were competitors against each other in college. And you know, so with the show, I like to start out by talking about, and I started the BluePrint during the course of this pandemic, and I started out with the importance and power of family. So, I talk to each guest about the importance of family. So, what does family mean to you? Mom, dad, and I know your dad is, experiencing something right now. So, talk to me, growing up with them, mom and dad, and that whole experience and siblings.
Sure. One thing you talked about when you and I first met, that I can't gloss over, because that's the thing that, has kind of kept us together, even though we're across the country, is really family and friends. And having been at the NBA, you talked a little bit about our work together and developing young people, right? Which is what we were doing when I was at the NBA and player development, and you being a part of the community, and certainly the Boys and Girls Club in Mount Vernon, which is next door, of course, to Manhattan and the NBA, really formed like that foundation of the work of really who I am and what I've been doing my whole life. And it all started really with family. You know, as you mentioned, my dad, who is 96 years old, actually, you know, with dementia, and struggling, like you said, a little bit health wise. And everybody that knows me knows how important my family is to me, particularly my dad, you know, and my mom, because they set the foundation for really what became the trajectory of my life. You know, my mom was committed and dedicated to education. My father was the guy who went to work, you know, that worked 3 shifts around the clock to make sure that we had everything that we needed. But really, the most important thing about my family, and which is ingrained in me and a part of who I am today, is my faith.
Mm.
And that is, they raised us, you know, in the church, in Sunday school, and BYPU. My siblings and I, my 2 sisters and 4 brothers, we grew up in that environment. So we rely on faith because that's where we started out, you know, in terms of our life. So my family means everything to me, from instilling the values of education and hard work, um, having faith and confidence that you could achieve anything that you wanted to. And those are the values that I've carried my entire life, and try to instill upon the young people that I have the great fortune to work with.
Yeah, and you mentioned 2 sisters and 4 brothers. I mean, where do you fit in?
Well, currently I am now the youngest of the 7.
Okay.
Youngest, probably age would indicate that. I just recently had a birthday, so I'm currently the youngest. And really, people ask me this all the time too, because I've been in sports my whole life, but really the only athlete in
Yeah,
the family, believe it or not. That will probably surprise you,
yeah.
Lois, because you know, growing up in a small town, I grew up in Central Texas, right outside of Waco, and you know, everybody played sports. High school that I went to was so small; there were like 80 people in my graduating class, and when I was in high school, you had to play all the sports, you know, at a very small school. So I played basketball and ran track, you know, and all of those things. But you know, but sports had a big impact on my life and my family. So I was the only athlete in the family, but certainly family supported me throughout my whole career. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to the University of Houston, and it just really kind of laid the foundation for my life and the passion I developed for sports.
Wow. So, I mean, how does that happen? What did your brothers and sisters do, and how did you get into the only one?
Well, the way I got into to be the only one is the first 4 siblings, the oldest, were 2 years apart. Okay, and then there was 6 years before my parents had the last 3, which were 2 years apart. So we call it the first family and the first set and the second set, even though we, you know, we have the same parents. But that first set, back in those days, my parents actually didn't allow them to play sports because they didn't want them to get hurt.
Right.
And so my brothers were in Boy Scouts, right? And my sister, oldest sister, was an academic, was a scholar, graduated high school at 16 and college at 19.
Wow.
So my parents were kind of fearful of, you know, of sports and injury. By the time I came along, and the brother 2 years older than me, you know, did have some experience in football, but as far as advancing like to the next level and the college level, you know, they did not. So it was an interesting kind of environment, but a good story, Lowe's, is when I graduated high school. My high school was so small, and I'm going to age myself now.
Uh,
Okay, so when I graduated high school, the NCAA was not recruiting uh, female girl basketball players to college to get scholarships. You had to try out, and you might remember these days. So you had to go around to different institutions and try out. So my story about my siblings is that my oldest brother put me in a car my senior year in high school, and he drove me all around Texas. And I tried out. at different colleges and universities and ended up at the University of Houston. So I'll always be indebted to my oldest brother because he actually helped me to get the scholarship. You know, they all in one way or the other. I had another brother when I was in undergrad here at the University of Houston. I had to student teach. So about 30 miles east of Houston is a town called Baytown. And I did my student teaching at Sterling. Well, I stayed with one brother during the period of time that I was student teaching. And just, you know, he opened his home and, you know, his life and everything to me. So great relationship there, you know, that I had with him. And then, you know, in and out of my graduate studies, had a brother when I went back to Michigan to finish my doctorate that I actually stayed with him in his home. And I always like to say that he is actually responsible for helping me to succeed, you know, from an academic perspective, because I spent 2.5 years living in his home, finishing up my doctorate. So, you know, from those brothers to the other brother who is in business, you know, and the sisters who were entrepreneurs, just their whole, I guess, embracing me. You know, I was that kid, Lowe's. I was that kid in my family that everybody really put all their hopes and their dreams into. And, you know, there's one in every family.
Right.
And in my family, that was me. And so they put everything into me and lifted me up. And to this day, I owe everything to my family and to my faith.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you know, when you look at, you know, that's why I had asked that question about where you fell in the order of things. Because I happen to be the oldest.
Oh,
You know, as I stated, when I was going through some stuff with my mom and dad, and they ended up getting divorced, and then my mother telling me I'm going to be, I'm now going to be the man of the house, like 11 or 12.
mm-hmm.
See, and I was like looking around like a man. What is, you know, what is that? And then she said something very simple to me. She said, "You remember, whatever you do and whatever you say, your brothers and sisters are going to do, and they're going to say. So make sure you be careful about what you do and what you say."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Wow, okay, I think I can try to handle that." And then I know what it is, you know, from my wife to be like in the middle as a middle child. And, you know, you getting it from both, you know, you kind of get it from both sides. You know? And then my sister, I understand her situation like you, she was the youngest. And so she couldn't be touched. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, and nobody could touch Tracy, you know, no, we're going to fight. For that. So, I mean, and the mother treated her as such, you know, she got all the privileges, and you know, so yeah, I kind of feel you, you know, but to have that, what I call it's an entourage when you got you had a whole entourage behind you pushing you, and that's a beautiful thing, you know, and that's exciting, and so talk a little bit more in detail about that process of the importance of education, because we're going somewhere. Sooner or later, we're going to get to education and athletics. But yeah, talk about that process of becoming a doctor. I mean, I know that had to be, especially an athlete too. You're playing, going to school. That's not an easy task. And to be successful in the classroom, highly successful in the classroom, and then do all the other things. Talk about some of that process.
Sure. You know, as I mentioned earlier, the whole idea of the importance of education began with my mom, you know, instilling it in us when we were kids and growing up. In fact, I sometimes think one of the reasons I became a teacher is because of my mom, who did subsequently go back and get her teaching certificate at age 57, you know, after we had all grown up and were out of the house and teaching ourselves. But my first memory of education and the success actually that I felt came from the fact that, Lowe's, I actually taught my younger sister, who was 2 years younger than me, how to read before she went to first grade.
Wow.
And that was my experience growing up in my household. My mom made sure that we all could read before we went to first grade. So the feeling of satisfaction that I got when I taught Diane how to read before she went to first grade, it started there because I was successful at it, and it was something that I could do. And so that really kind of motivated me to want to learn. And then, as I entered elementary school, sort of a side story you probably don't know, but I went to elementary school. Now I'm really going to age myself in 1965.
Okay.
In 1965, we know what was happening in the country during that time. So I was one of three kids in my small town that actually integrated an entire school system. Three
Okay.
of us for 3 years integrated the school system. And after then, my brothers came over who were attending an all black school on the east side of the city that we grew up in. So I had a cultural experience with education, going to first grade and feeling afraid, but feeling like this is something, that I have to do. I'm representing my family. I remember my mom standing there with me, behind me, those first at first grade. So that experience taught me to appreciate difference and diversity. And I had great teachers. And then that, went forward to becoming involved in athletics and sports and coaching and having mentors who were coaches through high school and then on to the scholarship at the University of Houston. And so it was no secret that when it was time to declare my major in college that I wanted to be a teacher and a
Wow.
coach.
Yeah.
I had a brother at the time who was in college to be a teacher. And as I said, my mom had instilled it in us. So I majored in education at Houston, got an undergraduate degree there, became a coach and a teacher in the Houston Independent School District. And as I mentioned, in Baytown, 30 miles east of there. And Lowe's, it was in that experience that I became interested in young people
Mm.
and not only educating them, but concerned with their development.
Right.
So that inspired me to go on and get a degree in counseling. So I ventured to Michigan State the first time and went through the urban counseling program at MSU and got that particular degree, worked in the public schools in Michigan and in higher education. And so that added another skill set, if you will, to my repertoire all along my passion for education, for helping others and developing others. And then, of course, then that continued to aspire to learn more, to develop my research skills, to be able to do some other things. And this journey of education was not a straight line, though. There was a particular period of time in between getting those degrees and working that I took some time off and segued in between, working in the secondary schools and working in higher education and athletics. And that was actually done through the NCAA. I
Mm.
actually interned at the NCAA, and that was really my segue from secondary education into higher education athletics administration. And so basically, when you talk about segue and, how do you find your niche, what you're really interested in, it was that experience at the NCAA because that showed me that there was a way to combine my interest in education with counseling, with helping student athletes. And I didn't have any idea that there were positions and jobs like academic advising and student athlete development. And, I was an athlete, but we didn't have those things when I went to undergrad. And so that kind of formed my career path. Here's
Right.
something that I can do. I can combine all these elements, learning the business of sports at the college level, the professional level. And then that propelled me on to get the PhD eventually and kind of bring all those things together.
Wow. That's very powerful. And yeah, I can see the process. I mean, you combine your education, your athletics. I mean, and I think it's what I said earlier. Many athletes, particularly I would say male athletes, Our whole mindset, and maybe in your time, both my wife played at Fairfield University, and my daughter Sherelle played at Fairfield University. They both graduated from Fairfield. My youngest Sherelle is actually coaching, assistant coach at Fairfield now. Right. So, as a male, we knew that there was a dream or opportunity that could, if we play real well, we could make it to the NBA. And so that was our mindset. And so first and foremost, I'm going to the NBA, and then secondary. I mean, at least for me, secondary was the education part of it. But for women, at the time, there was no WNBA, right? And then there was a league. I'm trying to remember that the first women's league, because I know New York had a team, the Stars, right? New York Stars, and but it was just starting to get off, to come into play, and so so you could your focus may be, okay, well, there's no pros, so I need to focus on my academics, and which we need to focus on both. It's easier said than done today when so much emphasis is put on playing of the sport, and then so this whole thing on helping student athletes is so important. So that's before the NBA, right? That's the life before the NBA and that whole process. But I want to ask you a question in regards to, you were talking about reading, and one of the reasons why I wrote my book. My first two chapters dealt with family. Second chapter dealt with my obstacle or weakness, which for me, it was illiteracy, right? But in order for me to fulfill a dream, right, you can't have one without the other. You can't have the ball without the books. So I realized, in order to achieve my dream, I would have to do better in school. And then upon learning from my counselor that I was reading in the 9th grade, reading at 7th grade level, I needed to, there's something I needed to improve on. So for me, a big thing is reading and reading comprehension, and which leads into great writing skills, which leads into the ability to do almost anything that you to achieve in any class that you take, if you can read and comprehend. So talk to me a little bit before we move forward about the importance of this whole process of reading, literacy.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, because, I've talked to a lot of people, and now that I'm in business, on the business side of education, all you hear about, you read about, are great leaders, and even entrepreneurs, and how much they read every week, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even in the business world that I'm in, you hear about those men and women spending so much time each week reading. And that's what I like to impart upon my student athletes, during my career coaching sessions. And the thing I tell young people is, reading is just critical. By reading, you can travel anywhere in the world, right? And now you don't even have to read a book, so to speak, right? In the physical sense. I still do, because those 15 years of commuting back and forth from Westchester and Stamford, Connecticut to Manhattan, I'm still old school, even though people had their laptops and their iPads and iPods on the train. I like that hard copy of my book, because I'm traveling those and I can highlight, right?
Right.
Still, and those kind of things. But the main point is that reading expands your knowledge, not only of your current environment, but in places where you may never travel. I was fortunate at the NBA to be able to travel to, at least a half a dozen countries.
Right.
And you as a former NBA player, right? You know this. And so being able to travel, in addition to read, not only expands your knowledge, it expands your experience. And it's just critical. In fact, in my transition from the NBA, one of the things that I had always wanted to do was to write and publish. That's why I was so excited to hear about your book.
Yeah.
But when you work in business and you work in sports, you're traveling all the time, and so that academic muscle, as you know, is a completely different thing
Yes,
than the muscle that you use, and so it requires some thought, it requires research, it requires looking at other literature, and so I'm so excited that since transitioning from the NBA, I've been able to focus more on reading, focus more on writing and publishing and those kinds of things. And then I guess finally, on that point, Lowe's, there's so many different ways now to read. Like I said, there's electronically. I teach, as you know, a graduate course at Georgetown, and I teach an undergraduate course at Michigan State. And I was trying to order my books for the first semester when I taught my graduate class, and I waited too late kind of to order them, and I was like, I got to get these books. How am I going to get them? And I go on Amazon, and they're like, once I paid for them and ordered them, they gave me access to the Kindle like right then.
Wow.
Yeah, I had no idea that you could do that. So there's no excuse. There's all kinds of tools that you can read. We have ebooks coming out in my new website that we're going to launch in the next few weeks. We have ebooks there for women who are looking to go into the field of athlete development, and everybody's reading ebooks now. So not only is it critical, reading to your future, in your life, there's all kinds of ways to do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, when we are shopping, I mean, this is the thing that I missed about the holidays now, because my wife and I, we usually out and about looking for gifts and different things like that, and she will not let me go near a Barnes and Noble. I'm lost. I went from hating reading and actually loving. I got books everywhere. I got them on my cell phone, my iPad. I got books in the room, and I just think I'm in the midst of with Chris Broussard. I know you probably know Chris Broussard.
Yes.
And he was on the show a few months ago, and I'm the president of the King Movement Westchester, and so we're in the midst of, during this pandemic, we're in the midst of combating a literacy campaign, and sometimes we're out in the street and we're giving away hundreds of books and talking about the benefits of reading. And so that, you being in education, and then my father-in-law, who, passed a few years ago, was an educator and a principal right here in Yonkers. And so he was big. It was big for him, and why my kids, my wife and her sister and brother and my kids grew up with somebody who pushed them to know their history and man, knew poetry when they were like 2 and 3 years old. I mean, which is a very powerful thing. So I thank you for that. And remember, this is Lowe's Moore. You're on the BluePrint, and this is interactive. So if you have any questions for Dr. Hilliard, you can just pop them on at any time, and we'll try to ask. I just think that this is, and I've had a lot of great conversations, but this is just a very powerful thing, because there's so many young people and that want to be athletes, and sometimes they get lost and not realize that the student comes with the athlete and you're not an athlete student, you're a student athlete. And so I think this is very just a very powerful show for all those young people that are sitting in the midst of this pandemic, right? And you need to hear this while you're pausing for just a moment, right? While you're pausing for just a moment, this is an appropriate time. I say this is, everybody see this as it is crazy time, but I also see this as an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to get better at all your skills, better at, your reading skills, your writing skills, your math skills. This is the time to do it. So when you come out this pandemic, you need to be better than you came into it. And so, Dr. Here, I want to say thank you for that. And so, talk to me about the journey to the NBA, and that whole NBA experience.
Wow, that was a big part of my life, and a very exciting part of my life. And not anything that I really planned, Lowe's. I talk to young people now all the time, and again, I mentioned the women that I career coach who are interested in working in athlete development, and everybody wants to know, how did you get there? Like,
Yeah.
not like there is a pathway, that I followed, a trail, and I'm quick to say that it wasn't anything that I planned. It wasn't anything that I structured. Really, I'm an educator, and so I've been fortunate enough to do education, if you will, in sports.
Right.
And having been an athlete, that has really is what has guided my journey. So after spending, time in the public schools here in Texas, and then even in Michigan, always having had my hand in sports and athletics, as a counselor, as a teacher, as a coach, always something that I was interested in, but not didn't really know. Like I said earlier, how do you bring all of this together?
Mm.
And I mentioned that segue from the NCAA internship into my first academic advising, position, at North Carolina the first time. And so spending time in student athlete development at UNC, and then at Houston, here, in sort of that pathway, and bringing all those skills together and experiences. I had no thought in interest really in professional sports. I had no idea that there was anything that I could do as an educator. But around 2000, 2001, after I had finished a PhD and went back to North Carolina, to direct that program, the NBA created the Development League, which
Wow.
I know you're very familiar with. You're there in New York, in the mecca of MSG, right?
Mhm.
So in creating the Development League, Commissioner Stern wanted to create this model because he knew that the men playing in the league were not all necessarily going to make it to the NBA. So this philosophy that he had in creating the Development League was truly a development league. Now we know it now as the G League,
Yes.
Gatorade League, but in its inauguration, he hired me to come to New York, because of my background in education and student athlete development and curriculum development, to create this continuing education model for the inaugural D League. And so that opportunity came to me, because of my background in education,
Right.
because of my experience in coaching and sports, and just working with student athletes. And so that is how the journey to the NBA came about. So I left North Carolina in 2001 and went to New York, which I think we met a few years later, as you mentioned, and created this model curriculum for the G League players. And then that involved continuing education. It involved career development, which is how you and I met at a lot of Ben Gordon's
Yes.
events right there in Mount Pleasant with his mom, and a lot of the work that she was doing, and other athletes.
Right.
One thing I enjoyed about the NBA is that it had a very expansive community relations, is what we called it then. Now it's more social responsibility community programs, but really encouraged the athletes and supported them, not only for the team and the league and the Players Association, but also in their own efforts. So with Ben, as that example again that we keep talking about, is how I was able to get out into the community in Mount Vernon and with other players. Rip Hamilton, I remember going to Coatesville, to Detroit, all of these other places, and being able to support players in their career development, along with their continuing education and their life skills development. So work with the D League for a couple of years, and then, transitioned over and started working, more with NBA teams.
Right.
And by doing that, I was able to expand, the work that I was doing and the experience that I had, not only with the players in the league and the union, but also in the community.
We know, you probably know this. I played 3 years in the NBA.
Yes.
And then I found myself, in the CBA, which is, the Continental Basketball Association. And I was there specifically to get back to the NBA. And, as you talk about the development league, the CBA was only to develop, the physical side or the athletic side of a player, with the hope to get back to the NBA or to continue to play the game that they love, or give you an opportunity to go overseas if possible. And it never really was about anyone asking me the question, when this is over, what if you can't get back to the NBA? What are you going to do? And at that particular time, I hadn't finished my degree. So once when I was a senior and the draft came, I was gone. And it wasn't until I realized I wasn't going back to the NBA, I started to think about, man, what you going to do next? What's going on? And that was a moment for me that I had a discussion maybe about 2 years ago, right after I wrote my book. And many of my friends, my wife said, man, we should do something on when the crowd stopped cheering, because what I found at that time was I was stuck. It's got to be worse today because I was doing Nintendo back in the day. And we had a couple of kids. So I'm playing Nintendo basketball. My wife was asking me if I'm going to clean up and I had something cooked when I got home. I mean, you find yourself on unemployment, right? And here you're a big NBA player, All-American in college, and then stuck. And many of the guys, when I was saying it to Michael Ray Richardson and Otis Birdsong, we were having this conversation. He said, man, 90% of the former players are stuck, right? And I thought about that thing, right? So the G League was right on time. I mean, in regards to that next step to help that athlete, that human being, that person, think about their future. I heard Bishop Jake say, there's a lot of people that learn how to get in a plane and take off, right? They may even know how to fly that plane, but how do you land, right? He said the only person that gets in the plane, takes off without learning how to land is a terrorist.
Oh, whoa, that's deep. That's deep.
And I was like, man, what will be your legacy? And that's what you're saying with the G League. And so, yeah. And, talk a little bit more about the NBA. And you mentioned Commissioner Stern, which was he was a good friend of mine and donated to the Boys and Girls Club of Mount Vernon. And, he was a unique guy because I used to just call him as a former player. I used to just call him up. Mm-hmm. I got a question for the commissioner, and for some reason I told him who I was, worked at the Boys Girls Club, played in the NBA. I got some questions about basketball, AAU, and I had some questions. Never thinking that he would ever call me back, but he used to call me back and have a conversation with me. That was the unique thing about about him. So talk to me a little bit more about that NBA experience before we kind of jump to the next thing here.
Sure, David is an amazing guy. You had to love him, or you had to love him. I mean, he had a different kind of leadership style, but you cannot question his dedication to uh, to sports, to basketball, the kinds of things that he created, kind of in that whole space of social responsibility and being in the community, and helping players to develop, retired players, and of course, Adam Silver has even expanded, that platform, the work that he and Kathy Barons and those guys do, in social responsibility, and our good friend Leo Wilcox, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That who has been there forever. Our friends over in the Players Association side, Krista Chen and all of those guys as well. With Michelle Roberts being there, on both sides. But the NBA experience was one that I just cannot even explain it. It was so fantastic for someone to come from a small town in Central Texas, to being a college student athlete, to ending up at the NBA, which is considered, the premier sports league in the world. From a business perspective, from a sports perspective, from a social responsibility perspective. I mean, it is the envy of all sports leagues. It is the model. And so to have that opportunity to not only do education, if you will, in that space, also the opportunity to work with the WNBA when I was there, and to do the things that I love. And I mentioned earlier, just traveling the world, understanding business, Lois, the business of sports, and being in a capacity to help players coming into the league, as you know, are very young, to make that transition. You talk about education, and how do you approach that, with a professional athlete who is focused on his and her skill and the business of sport, and being able to interject education in that process, and to help them to prepare to not only fulfill their responsibilities while they were employed by the league, but also their personal and professional development, which is just as important in terms of what happens when the ball stops bouncing. How are they ready, as you mentioned earlier, to transition into another career? And so we hear that all the time, when we look at professional athletes, we look at college athletes, and often people feel like they're only focused on their sport, and they are. But I wouldn't say that they're singularly focused just on their sport. I think the approaches to education, for athletes, takes a special and unique approach. In fact, at Hilliard Solutions, we've developed a 360-degree athlete development model, which is a framework that we utilize in terms of all of our curriculum development, for athletes at the college, professional, and high school levels. And that 360-degree framework is built on understanding those all of the different aspects that impact an athlete's life. So in our model, we look at, you have BluePrint. Our BluePrint is, we look at education. What kind of education do athletes need? That fits their particular environment. Does that need to be online? What do they need to know about their rights? We look at the aspect of career development, which is what we're talking about now. How do we, in place of actual internships? And as you know, the pro level, you're playing all the time, you're traveling. How do you do that? We look at sociology as an aspect of our model. We look at what impacts them in society. We're looking at social justice now and activism. We look at psychology. How does that affect them in terms of performance? And what does that mean in terms of how we look at their motivation? And obviously economics, because sports is about the business of economics, even at the college level. And we look at those 5 aspects. And at Hilliard Solutions, we help professionals help athletes succeed. That's our model. We help professionals help athletes succeed at all levels. And by employing our 360-degree athlete development framework, our model, that is how we develop leaders. It's how we prepare them to work with athletes to be successful. What should their curriculum look like? What should the skill set look like to help athletes? And so, in short, all of my experiences at the NBA kind of culminated from my experiences in secondary education, and have been able to transition them over into Hilliard Solutions. But, it's the experience of a lifetime. You're in New York City. There's nothing like New York City, in the country. You've got to go there. You got to see the ball drop. You've got to experience MSG. You've got to go to a Yankees game. You've got to go to the U.S. Open. All of these things, just are just an amazing experience for me. I think in a lifetime that I was very, very blessed to live.
Yeah, no. And yeah, we really want to get into, and as we come up on what I consider we're coming up close to, we're going to have a couple of pop-up guests so they can ask you some questions.
Oh, great.
So, and then we're going to continue. We're going to get in depth with that, with the Hilliard Solutions. So, let's see. Who when you were in the league and you were working with, and I know you work with Ben, but is there anybody you work with that you thought that their projects or their mindset in terms of their community development and their career development, that they were on top of their game?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I haven't been asked that before, so I'm glad that you asked that, especially in the area of community development and community investment. It's one of the projects that I'm working on now, in terms of how do we better prepare our athletes to invest in their own communities. How do we give them those skill sets in order to do that? And so, Lois, I think in the 15 years that I was at the NBA, I probably worked with 2/3 of the NBA teams. Okay. So yeah, probably 2/3 that I actually work with throughout my tenure. And a part of that was being aware and involved in their community involvement. And there were a lot of them. So, when you start calling names, you get in trouble as far as players. But I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of that, for the interest of our guests on the show. And if my athletes, that I don't call out, they smack me on the head next week. I just got to take that hit. But from a women's perspective, I'll start there. I'll just give a couple of examples. Obviously, Tamika Catchings is someone that comes to my mind. That I've known Tamika, since she played at Tennessee and came into the WNBA. I worked with her dad, Harvey Catchings, worked with us in player development, and her commitment then and her commitment now to the community, her engagement in social activism, being a part of the whole leadership group with the WNBA, involved in her union, and the kind of work that she's done through the NBA and through the Players Association, and her Catch the Stars Foundation, putting in a plug for her now, is someone that I would, hold up as a great example of commitment to community and investment, those then and now. Adonal Foyle is one of the players, I had an opportunity to work with the Warriors back when he was playing. Adonal Foyle has done and continues to do amazing things in the community, back in his country and also in the United States, in terms of mentoring and the work, that he's doing as well. There are others, that I can name, Rip Hamilton, back in the day. I'd go to Coatesville every year to Rip Hamilton's events, when he was involved with the NBA, playing with the Pistons, is one that stood out, in my mind in terms of things that he was truly committed to, back in the day. So now, all players, most players, not only in basketball, but if you look at football, you look at baseball, and even MLS, right, at this point, not only they're engaged in social activism, all of them, either through their agents, through their own foundations, are more and more invested into the community. So I think it's impressive, and I feel especially happy, to feel like I've been a part of that movement, of planting those seeds of those young men and women, way back in the day. So I could name a dozen or so of them that I'm still engaged with today. Mike Wilkes, who's assistant coach with the OKC Thunder, is still doing work back in Milwaukee. And I could go on and on, but that was the other part of being a professional athlete, your responsibility on the court, but also to the community. And I think that most pro sports leagues are really, really good and dedicated to this.
Well, yeah, and it's funny you mentioned O'Donnell Foyle. I met him up in Cornell University. He was a phenomenon up there as a player and a student athlete. Just amazing. I mean, when I met him, I just knew that he had an opportunity to make it to the league, but also he was very community focused, and so yeah, and went to school and played with a purpose, and that's very powerful within itself. I was actually Rip Hamilton. I met down in Maryland at a golf outing, and we talked for a while about some of the things that he was doing. I'm going to mention some names and some other people.
Okay.
Tobias Harris. I've known Tobias Harris since he
yes
was a little guy. My daughter Sherelle played with his sister in AAU in Long Island, and he everywhere he's gone, he's impacted that community. I know his dad. We played against each other in college, and man of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Man of community, right? Just a very powerful individual, and there's so many others. You can get into Steph Curry, James. I mean, just so many guys that are, and I think you have to look at when this all, like your Magic Johnson. When you started to see athletes go beyond the court, right, and they started to think about business, right, and think about community, and those things are very very powerful. So yeah, I want to thank you for that, and hopefully I didn't get you into
well, the only way we'll get in trouble, Lowe's, is if we start naming guys and women and we don't cover those young folks that are from NYC, right? So that's the thing. We definitely remember those guys and women, because New York is, like I said, it's a unique place, and for athletes to come back, and be involved in the community, and I got to give you some props, man. I think what you were doing in Mount Vernon, and I know people who know you on this show know this, but for our national guests and hopefully friends of mine that have tuned in, need to know that you really, this man is a legend in New York. Now, again, the folks in NYC, they all know this, but you got some of my people tuning in tonight. And so they're in Texas and North Carolina and Michigan and all of these places around the world that follow Hilliard Solutions. And I need you guys to know that, Lowe's Moore is an extraordinarily unique individual, for someone that led the Boys and Girls Club in a major city for years and years, and the footprint, Lowe's, that you've left in the community. And I'm just so blessed to have known you, and just the legacy you've built there is just unmatched.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hilliard. I appreciate that, man. I tell you, it was something about, you and Leah, who I tried to get on the show. You know how Leah is. So, I'll get you some guests, but nah.
Leah. That's Leah.
Yeah, I love it. And you guys did an amazing job at Mount Vernon, and with Ben too as well.
Thank you.
And so I want to thank you, man. It's just been a pleasure to have known you, to know you, and all the great work that you did in the NBA and doing with Hilliard Solutions. And at this time I want to pop on a couple of guests. They know each other, so I want them pop one here together. My wife, Patrice Moore, and also Marsha Blunt is going to pop on as well. My wife is going to come and sit next to me. You're going to see her come on. I don't know if her mic is plugged in. Make sure you plug your mic in. And so, you know, as I told you, my wife played at Fairfield University.
Mhm.
Yeah, and she played at Fairfield University, graduated, got a master's. She's in social work, MSW, all those different things. Runs a hospital and different things like that. And Marsha played ball at Queens College, played at Mount Vernon. They won the first women's state championship in the history of New York out of Mount Vernon High School. And they were teammates.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They were awesome, and as individuals they still awesome, and you know they represented Mount Vernon well. Marsha went on to be one of the first women to own a men's professional basketball league in the ABA now, and now with owner right of the WABA. Trying to get that league up. And my wife is one of the oldest owners of the Mount they both own in terms of the Mount Vernon team. And so I wanted them to pop on. I don't know why they were right here. And I was thinking about guests to pop on, and I didn't think about them until I got right to the show. You know, so at the last minute, had to do an audible here, and I want to introduce them, and they can just jump right in here. You have some questions for Dr. Hilliard.
Well, thanks, Lowe's, and thanks for the invitation to pop on. I actually love saying Dr. Hilliard, and and congratulations on all your success. Hilliard Solutions, congratulations.
Thank you.
One of the things I wanted to, without going too deep into your process for preparing athletes, what would you share with someone to prepare them? You know, because all of us, as Lo said, Patrice and I are former athletes. Not everyone's going to go to the professional level, but we still love the sport. And she and I are still engaged in it. What would you tell an athlete who's looking to continue a career in their sport?
Thank you, Marsha, for coming on and asking me that question. And Miss Patrice, I know it's Patrice, right? Don't get it twisted. It's Patrice. Thank you for coming on. And it's exciting that you guys were actually teammates. Thanks for the question. I actually consult with athletic departments now. Marsha, I spoke with the Big 12 school a few weeks ago. They have a committee where they're looking at how can they better serve their student athletes, right? And how can they better educate their athletic department staff and officials in terms of how to support athletes and coaches of color. And just yesterday, I was at a women's college basketball game here in Houston, and learned information from just being around coaches who are kind of asking that same question more and more now that you just asked. Now, some of it is around social justice, like how do we support these athletes? But when it comes to, there's so many things that they're dealing with now, from the social justice, wanting to get involved, their mental health and wellness, right? Their career transition. There's so much going on around them that the first thing, with student athletes and any athlete is to develop the relationship with them, which coaches you guys have and that we have. And then in developing that relationship, finding a way to help them understand, Marsha, that the skills that they have, the knowledge that they have, the interests that they have, the ability and all of the work ethic and leadership that they have is transferable into any career. And with athletes, sometimes we're so focused on our career, we're so focused on the game and winning and keeping our scholarship or whatever, we're not thinking that we have time to think about a career. Even though that's what we're trying to do, we have to, in my opinion, understand that no matter what level they're at, their focus is on their sport right then. And that's a difficult thing, not for coaches to understand, but for those who are not coaches and don't understand athletes. In order to connect with them, we have to use that language, and everything that we teach and counsel them on, put them in athletic terms.
Right, right.
That's the
How to
first
meet
thing.
them where they are is what
Yeah,
you're saying.
how to meet them where they are, but use
Right.
an athletic example when we talk about getting a degree, when we talk about a career of interest. When I was at the NBA, one of the pilot programs that I created that engaged the D League, the NBA team, its D League team, and a university in that area. The purpose of that model was to interest our younger players, like our one and dones, in education. But in order to do that, the approach was in combining our resources, the league, the development league team, and the university, is to sort of backdoor them into education and a degree by talking about a career of interest that they might have. Because athletes are not always interested in traditional careers, and continuing education has to be non-traditional for athletes.
True.
So if it's at the professional level and we're talking about a certificate program, if we're talking to a young man or lady that's interested in real estate, and some of this might be also somewhat applicable at the college level. However, at the college level, you got to get that degree, and that requires a certain criteria. So, and the other thing, too, as a coach, is that when you talk about career development with athletes, especially at the college level, they first have to get that degree. So they've got to meet a certain academic criteria. So in many cases, they are limited to their course selection. So their interest in a career is sometimes dwarfed by them having to stay eligible, taking classes they may not be interested in. And so they are less exposed to careers. So the next thing that we can do is better expose them to careers in sports. And at Hilliard Solutions, we've done presentations. I've gone out to coaches before COVID. We've done Zoom stuff where we've had sessions with athletes where we just talk about careers in sports. Similar to what Lowe's said earlier at the top of the broadcast, athletes are interested in careers in sports. Particularly, I think this is a great time for women athletes. Our Women in Athlete Development Symposium and networking event that we do, that's 100% online every April. We have a lot of former athletes, women who want to work in athlete development, have no idea, no clue of this field called athlete development. And who better to work in athlete development than athletes? So talking to them about that career, careers outside of coaching, I think we'll find the athletes very interested in, by talking about their careers, by sharing with them the different careers that are out there. And then the other thing I would say is utilize professional athletes as much as possible, either in examples, right? I think Lowe's talked about what the NBA players, many of them are doing now, whether it's Steph or Katie or whatever, in venture capitalists, or Tamika in whatever she's into as far as community. I use examples in any presentation that I do. If I'm talking about image and branding, I'm talking to athletes, use a model for them so that they can see other athletes are doing other things and how they are doing that. And I think this is a great time to talk to athletes about career development, because so many of them are doing so many different things in the space. I just want to see more women, more development of our female student athletes. So I hope those kinds of things are helpful in terms of motivating them. So it's education, it's helping them see their transferable skills, it's exposing them to different careers, and utilizing examples from the professional level.
Thank you. That's great.
Wow, that is actually awesome. As Marcia said, I also wanted to congratulate you on the excellent work that you've done. As Lowe's has mentioned, I also had the opportunity and privilege to meet with you during the Ben Gordon days when he was doing his Ben Gordon Day and Ben Gordon Weekend. And I was very impressed with you and Leah back then, and the relationship and the work that you did. And I also had the opportunity to work with Chris Chin.
Yes.
It had me train some very important young lady from another country, and I did some work with this young lady and her family. And it's just really impressive to me to see the glass ceiling that you all have shattered, so that so many of the women can participate in the way that they are now in the NBA. It's awesome for us to see women, Sue Bird and now Teresa Weatherspoon, who are now not just former athletes, but they're now also beginning to coach in the NBA. And that, to me, I find impressive, in the fact that we are able to get into places that we were never actually able to get in before. And I remember, I think there was, and I'm not quite sure of her name, Marcia might remember, but the first woman to coach a men's team was actually at Kansas, I believe. I think she was at Kansas, and she was the first one, I think, to be assistant coach on a men's NCAA level, or at least on a high NCAA level. So it's impressive for me. One of the questions that I wanted to, I'm not sure if it was Woodard, if it was her, but I know that for me, as a person, as a social worker, the mental health of a lot of our professional athletes, is I'm not quite sure, how we can really, I know there's a lot more work that's been done today than was in the past, and right now with COVID going on, and there's so many things. I think about Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, he lost 7 family members to COVID, and to be able to help this young man to find the level of motivation to play basketball when he's going to be grieving for quite a period of time. Like, how are we really able to tap into these resources to help these young men and women who are going to be coming back to have to focus on a game when they might have experienced significant losses in their lives as a result of the pandemic and any other reasons, because we've had some players that have lost family members to gun violence. And we've also had trauma in reference to some of the events that have happened, the social injustices that have happened. So what's been going on as far as the league?
Wow, this is a great timing of your question. Thank you, Patrice, for that. And I didn't know you were an MSW background. So that is exciting and obviously relevant to your question. I'm actually doing some work currently with the University of California, Berkeley School of Social Welfare. So along the issues that you just spoke directly to. So I'm definitely one to keep in contact with you. In fact, Berkeley is my major sponsor and partner for the Women in Athlete Development Symposium and Networking event next April. So we definitely have to talk about that. And part of the reason I wanted to partner with the School of Social Welfare and Dean Burton there is because she is interested in preparing folks to work with athletes from a training perspective, and also to be able to go back into the community and to impact, their experience over the life course is the terminology that you guys use in social work. And so I think that there's definitely a need. The need has been growing in the last, 2 to 3 years, when athletes started speaking out about their mental health and wellness challenges, from Michael Phelps, right, all the way to Kevin Love, right, but we know Shamiqua Holtzclaw. Right. If we go way back to Delonte West, and a lot of athletes, this has been an issue for some time. But I think that fortunately and finally, the athletes themselves, Patrice, are speaking up more and have taken the lead in saying, we must get this kind of help. We need this in order to perform. And so the organizations and institutions and conferences have gotten on board. They have no choice. And so this is a great moment in time. So you guys are probably aware that the Power 5 conference at their legislation NCAA meetings last January, declared that all Power 5 schools must have clinicians on their staffs to deal with student athlete development and wellness. And there have been a plethora of positions that have been created. around the country. And several of my colleagues and friends are overseeing these mental health and wellness institutes and programs. Some examples I know that are out there that are the best are at Temple. I have a colleague there at Ohio State. So there are more and more opportunities, Patrice, have been created in the last year and a half for MSWs, for clinicians and social workers. So the colleges and universities and NCAA has required, as best they can require, that these institutions employ these individuals, and they are embracing them. And so we want to get social workers and clinicians and sports psychologists ready to apply for these positions. The same thing has happened at the professional level. As you know, the NBA, the NFL, Major League Soccer, they are all now responding to this need, the outcry that's really being driven by the athletes. So I would say that this is a great time for those who want to work in sports, who have that clinician, mental health and wellness background, to become engaged with finding out, what the conference, the Big East is doing a lot of things. Again, I'll get in trouble calling out conferences and leaving those out. But, there are those, we track them, that are doing things at the conference level as well. The assistant coaches and Black coaches associations now, you're probably aware that, but behind the kind of social justice movement are now saying, we need to have more, not only support for our student athletes, but we need to also be able to support the mental health and wellness of staff and of coaches. So I think this is a great time to look into what conferences are doing, to look in what leagues are doing, and really kind of rallying up those folks who have that skill set, training, and preparation.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I was thinking earlier, we were talking to Alan over the last Alan Houston over this last, from the beginning of the year, and we talk a lot about players. Being former players, we talk a lot about players, today's players, and my word of the week was, this week was maturity. And with so many of the players coming in so young, right? When I was looking at the league, they were like grown men in the league, not that they were good at handling life experience. Even at 24, 25, 26 years old, they struggle. Now you look at a guy 18, 19, boatload of money, more money than these older guys got in the past, and looking at more life coaching, more career development, and while becoming better at being a professional athlete.
Can I also add the difference between the salaries back then? Most of the people, when they left the professional sports back in those days, actually were able to still earn that type of money if they had other careers. Maybe they were making $100,000 a year. A lot of those people probably later on were able to make that. When you're talking about 10, 15, $30 million, and then you leave basketball and have to try to work at a job that's making $50,000, that trajectory is so different. That lifestyle is so different. If you don't have a savings, what's going to happen is the first year you no longer coach, and you have to pay the taxes on that $1 million on that $1 million check that you had the year before. And now next year you're only making $70,000 or $100,000. That is a huge difference. And a lot of people, if they're not prepared for that transition, that financial transition, and I think that's what leads to some of the mental health, the addiction issues, things like that, because they're, and so I think your Hilliard Solutions is this is the preparation time to help people with life lessons, because that's something I think they miss, jumping from no money to millions of dollars back down to.
Yeah. And that was my point, young men coming into the league so young. And then now the opportunity for WNBA, right? For young ladies to maybe come out a little earlier. And to think about what it is that they're going to have a plan or blueprint, right, as they come in the league right away. It comes as a part of the millions of dollars and playing that, maybe the NBA, and I know that the NBA in their introductory to a player and WNBA coming into the league about what to be aware of. These are the things that happen in the league, the introduction into professional sports. I know that's a big thing. Commissioner Stern focused on it. I'm sure Commissioner Silver's focusing on it. But it's the continual holding of the hand all the way through that process. You just can't let go, because they and forget it and forget what's going on. So hopefully Hilliard Solutions are kind of thinking about those things.
Well, Lowe's, I know that we are winding down as far as time, but what you're talking about, I think is really important. We should have a whole show about this question that you're talking about right now. Because for 30 years of doing this work, I am convinced that what we really need to be doing is working and starting in our own community when it comes to financial literacy and education, when it comes to the career development that Marcia listed earlier, because there is so much to this thing called sports. But way before you get to the professional level, where there have been influences, where there have been situations, whereas there's the business of sports, where the decisions about education need to start so much sooner, so that our young people have a foundation that is balanced. And that means sensitive areas like looking at family and looking at the pressures sometimes and the expectations that we place on young people, particularly young men when they are 13 and 14 years old, and how we communicate to them about them becoming a professional. This is a sensitive area, right? And how they are cultured and grow up in our own community before they get captured into these systems that affect them much later. So there's a lot of conversation there, I think, in ways that we should start so much sooner when it comes to our athletes, and considering all of the facets that I spoke of earlier. And finally, everything that happens at the professional level eventually is going to happen at the college level and the high school level.
That's true.
And so curriculum and what we do in the career coaching, understand that name, image, and likeness, okay, which is the next hottest topic in college athletics, will have a profound impact on student athletes, and our student athletes of color in particular. And so when we think about preparing them as far as their education, their career development, their leadership abilities, I think that's where we need to be thinking, talking, collaborating more closely from the community as well as private business and the educational systems, and come up with a blueprint.
Yes.
How about that?
Yeah, that was cool. I like that. And we're in the final minute here, and I want, I mentioned one of the questions is, what would you say to a young person today? Leave them with something that would encourage them or motivate them.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate Patrice and Marcia, and please have me back. I definitely want to remind people to go to HilliardSolutions.com. We're also on social media. We'll be launching our new website soon, so you can get more information about Hilliard Solutions, what we do in terms of services. We'd love to support our communities all over. But for young people in particular, there's, I guess, 5 things that I really want to just say and impress upon them. One is to live your dreams. Kind of stole that from Les Brown.
Yeah.
Live your dreams. It's really important. Second, be yourself. Be who you are. Be the best of who you are as a young person. Third, have faith that, as you mentioned at the top of the call, all these things are going on in the world. We have to have faith and have a foundation. Fourth, love hard. That's what I've learned in life. Love hard. And I want young people to know that. And finally, give back. It's extremely important to give back to your community, to give back to where you came from in order to lift us all up.
Well, Dr. Hilliard, thank you. Appreciate you. Marsha, Patrice, as always. Dakota. You see everybody over there? Huh? Well, again, I want to thank everybody for supporting the Blueprint again. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. May God bless you all. And tune in. We got talent next week. And then the following week, we have Brandon Victor Dixon from Hamilton and Power. But I'm sure we're going to have a fun time with talent next week. God bless you. Love you guys. And thank you, Dr. Hilliard.
Thanks for having me, Peace.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Dr. Hilliard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Congratulations, Doc.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Lowe's More, the Blueprint podcast. Stay connected and follow us at our website, www.lowesmore.com. That's LOWESMOORE.com. You can also join the discussion on Twitter at Lowe's More and on Facebook at Lowe's More Jr. As always, thank you for pushing your mindset towards a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking portion of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast to stay fully up to date with everything we're up to. Until next time, be kind to yourself and each other.
What they teaching is a joke, I ain't buying it like I'm broke.